State Property looks like a cheap gangster movie, but it's actually a real crime story hiding inside 90 minutes of Philadelphia grit. Today you're getting 15 strange facts that will change the way you look at this movie forever. From the real crime syndicate behind the story to the tragedy that almost changed its soundtrack. And stick around for one bonus fact at the end that almost nobody in hip-hop wants to talk about. So speed up with me because the list starts now. Number 1. The director who learned from Spike Lee and shot Jay-Z's first video. Before this director ever touched a State Property script, he was already sitting inside two of the most important rooms in hip-hop and film history. Abdul Malik Abbott didn't stumble into this movie. His first real job was in the sound department on Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing back in 1989, the film that redefined how American movies talked about race, rage, and city blocks. A few years later, he crossed paths with a young rapper trying to break out named Sean Carter, and Abbott ended up directing Jay-Z's very first music video, I Can't Get With That. From there, Abbott kept climbing. He worked on Dead Presidents. He shot videos for Foxy Brown. He directed the platinum-certified long-form video Streets is Watching, which is basically a feature film disguised as a music video. So when Roc-A-Fella finally decided to make their first real movie, they didn't need to run auditions for a director. Abbott already understood the label's DNA. He already knew every face on the roster, every inside joke, every street they wanted to represent on screen. Think about it like a sports team promoting from within instead of gambling on an unproven free agent. Roc-A-Fella wasn't taking chances with their film debut. State Property was technically Abbott's first feature, but it came stacked with almost 15 years of hip-hop visual storytelling behind it, and that's exactly why the movie feels less like a vanity project and more like an extension of the culture itself. Number 2. The movie was ripped straight from a real Philadelphia crime syndicate. This wasn't some writer's room fantasy. Every plot point traces back to real bodies on real Philadelphia blocks. State Property is based on the Junior Black Mafia, or JBM, one of the most violent drug organizations Philadelphia ever produced. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, a man named Aaron Jones ran the operation, moving cocaine and heroin and eliminating competition with brutal efficiency. Their motto was "Get down or lay down," and that's not a paraphrase. That's the film's tagline, word for word. Aaron Jones is currently on death row in Pennsylvania, which tells you exactly how far this organization's violence went. Some former JBM members later criticized the movie for getting certain details wrong, but the bones of the story are true. The gang war was real. The bodies were real. The consequences are still playing out decades later in a state that's still dealing with the men who ran that empire. Roc-A-Fella didn't dream up a gangster fantasy for entertainment. They built a gangster echo, pulling directly from headlines that Philadelphia locals already knew by heart. That's a very different creative choice than most hood cinema of the era, which usually leaned on composite characters and vague, inspired by true events disclaimers. State Property named the game and played it straight. If you are enjoying this, take 2 seconds and leave a like. Subscribe if you want more videos like this. That support really motivates my work and helps a lot with bringing more content. Number 3. Beanie Sigel's name came from his grandmother and a Philly street. The star of this movie wasn't even born with the name on the poster. Dwight Grant needed a stage name, and he found it in 2 very personal places. His grandmother called him Beanie when he was a kid, a nickname that just stuck around. Then there was Sigel Street in South Philadelphia, his actual neighborhood, his actual block, the streets that raised him. Put those 2 pieces together and you get Beanie Sigel. But there's a third layer people miss entirely. The name also echoes Bugsy Siegel, the infamous real-life gangster from Hollywood's golden age. Whether that overlap was intentional or just a happy accident, it fit the character and the movie perfectly. Here's a bonus detail that connects decades later. In 2021, Kanye West publicly credited Beanie Sigel with giving him the Yeezy nickname. Think about that chain of influence for a second. A guy who played a low-level enforcer in a $600,000 hood film ends up naming one of the biggest fashion brands on the planet. Philadelphia stays connected in ways you don't expect, and Beanie Sigel's name is proof that hip-hop history rarely stays in one lane. Number 4. They filmed on active drug corners, and the crew was terrified. Most movies fake the danger. This one filmed right in the middle of it. State Property didn't use dressed-up sets or former hotspots. The production shot on active drug trafficking streets in Philadelphia, meaning real dealers were still working those same corners while cameras rolled. This wasn't recreated grit. This was grit happening in real time, a few feet away from the crew. Cast and crew members later admitted the tension wasn't theoretical, it was standing on the next corner, watching. Additional scenes were shot outside Philadelphia too, in Paterson, New Jersey, in Yonkers, New York, and in Cresskill, but Philadelphia remained the true heartbeat of the production. That heartbeat came with real risk attached to it, the kind most studio productions insure against with security teams and closed sets. One cast member later said he wished he could go back and redo a few things differently after seeing how the finished film turned out, which tells you how raw and unrehearsed some of that on-location energy actually was. You can't fake that kind of tension on a soundstage. State Property got its authenticity the hard way by shooting in the actual world it was trying to portray. Number 5. Jay-Z's only film role was just 2 minutes of screen time. Look at the poster. Look at the marketing. Now look at how little he's actually in the movie. Jay-Z's name is plastered everywhere on this film's promotional material, but his actual screen time adds up to roughly 2 minutes. Blink and you'll genuinely miss it. Director Abbott put it plainly himself, calling it more of a cameo than a starring role, and admitting it wasn't the ideal situation for the story they originally wanted to tell. Here's the context that explains why. State Property shot in 2001, the exact same year Jay-Z dropped The Blueprint, widely considered one of the greatest hip-hop albums ever made. He was recording, touring, running a record label, and running a clothing line all at the same time. He was building an entire empire in real time, and a movie shoot simply couldn't compete for his calendar. So the production split his intended role into 2 separate characters. Jay-Z plays Untouchable Jay, the silent, barely seen kingpin that Beanie Siegel's character is trying to surpass. Damon Dash plays Boss Dame, the enforcer who ended up with most of the dialogue originally written for Jay-Z. One vision became 2 characters because of a scheduling conflict, and it changed the entire tone of the film in the process. Number 6. The Scarface homage goes way deeper than just a coin flip. State Property doesn't hide its influences. It wears them right on its sleeve. The famous coin flip scene is pure Scarface, but not the 1983 Al Pacino version most people think of first. It's actually a callback to the original 1932 Scarface, where George Raft made that coin flip iconic playing a gangster named Gino Ronaldo in Howard Hawks' classic. Every coin-flipping mobster since then, from Looney Tunes parodies to Two-Face in Batman, traces back to that original moment. But Variety's review at the time pointed out something sharper. State Property's debt to Scarface goes way beyond one homage scene. The entire structure mirrors Tony Montana's arc, almost beat for beat. A broke kid has a murderous rise to power. He builds an empire on bodies. Betrayal comes from the inside. Death comes by an assassin's bullet in the back. Even the possessive, protective relationship with a sister figure echoes Pacino's obsession in the original film. Director Abbott reportedly wanted some ironic distance from his protagonist's limited worldview, adding a layer of commentary most low-budget hood films skip entirely. Critics weren't always sure the irony landed, partly because some of the acting made it hard to tell where satire ended and sincerity began. Call it Scarface, with a Philly accent. The influence is unmistakable, intentional, and honestly kind of clever for a $600,000 production. Number 7. One actress went from this movie straight to reality TV stardom. You've probably seen this actress on cable television and had no idea she started here. Sundie Carter was a Philadelphia native with formal drama training from Temple University and the Freedom Theater. State Property gave her one of her earliest film roles, playing Aisha, Beanie Siegel's love interest, and the woman caught between loyalty and survival throughout the story. After this movie, Carter kept working steadily. She appeared in Soul Plane in 2004. She landed a role in Bringing Down the House alongside Steve Martin and Queen Latifah. She also popped up in music videos for Busta Rhymes and Music's Soul Child, building a resume that mixed film, television, and music entertainment. Then reality television came calling in a much bigger way. In 2013, Carter joined the cast of VH1's Basketball Wives LA, trading independent hood cinema for glossy reality drama, watched by millions of people every week. Different spotlight, same hustle. She went from gritty street cinema to premium cable drama, proving this cast had more range than critics ever gave the movie credit for. Number 8. This $600,000 movie quietly made over $11 million. On paper, this movie should have been a total financial disaster. State Property wasn't a Hollywood production with studio backing. It was a calculated, low-budget bet with a total production cost of just $600,000. Roc-A-Fella funded the entire thing internally with no studio interference and no bloated overhead, just enough money to shoot the vision they actually wanted. The theatrical box office came in around $2.1 million across a limited release of just 61 theaters, mostly concentrated in urban markets. Critics hated it, but that didn't matter to the numbers. Home video is where everything changed. DVD sales, VHS rentals, and constant BET airings pushed the film's total earnings to approximately $11 million, roughly 18 times the original budget. Director Abbott summed it up years later, pointing out that a hip-hop-driven gangster film shot for under $1 million ended up earning almost $11 million total, despite scoring a flat 0% on Rotten Tomatoes. An 18 times return on investment with zero critical support proves one simple thing. The streets don't read reviews, and the streets showed up with their wallets. Before we keep going, subscribe if you haven't yet. Drop a comment telling me which movie or show you want me to cover next with strange behind-the-scenes facts. I read every single one. Number 9. Aaliyah was supposed to be on the soundtrack. She died days before recording. The State Property soundtrack almost had one of the biggest voices in R&B on it, and then tragedy stepped in. Aaliyah heard the song Rock the Mic and immediately made her choice clear, telling Roc-A-Fella executive Kayambo Joshua, known as Hip Hop, that's the one. She was scheduled to fly out and record her feature with producer Just Blaze. The session was booked. The feature was locked in. On August 25, 2001, Aaliyah's plane went down in the Bahamas. She was only 22 years old. Longtime engineer Young Guru later remembered the aftermath in the studio, saying it was the first time he'd ever seen hip-hop cry. The remix still happened eventually, with Nelly and Murphy Lee stepping in to fill the feature slot, but the original vision died with her that day. It's just one more devastating what if in a music industry career already full of them, and it adds a layer of real-world grief underneath a movie that was already built around loss and consequence. Every time that remix plays, it carries the weight of a collaboration that never got to happen. Number 10. Damon Dash's character was originally written entirely for Jay-Z. The role that made Damon Dash a comedic scene stealer wasn't even supposed to be his. The character of Boss Dame wasn't originally supposed to exist as a separate role at all. Every line belonged to one person, Jay-Z. Director Abbott laid it out plainly, explaining that if Jay had performed all the lines written for Dame, he would have delivered them in a nonchalant, straight-to-the-point way, which is pretty much how Jay-Z naturally carries himself. But Jay-Z was juggling too much at once. The blueprint had just dropped. He was recording, touring, running a label, and running a clothing line simultaneously, and he couldn't commit to full shooting days on set. So the production split the character in two. Untouchable Jay became the silent, barely visible kingpin. Boss Dame became the loud, comedic enforcer, and Damon Dash leaned hard into that comedic energy, bringing an unexpected sense of levity to an otherwise violent film. Some critics thought that tonal shift felt out of place next to the movie's heavier scenes. One character became two performers with completely different energy, and the movie had to adapt its entire tone around a scheduling problem nobody saw coming. Number 11. The entire movie was shot on a format meant for documentaries. A $600,000 budget doesn't buy 35mm Hollywood cameras. It buys creativity instead. State Property was shot on Super 60mm film, a smaller and much cheaper format typically reserved for documentaries and independent projects. The production then blew the footage up to 35mm for its theatrical release, which was standard practice for low-budget films chasing a big-screen distribution deal. The result was grainy, raw, and unpolished in a way that actually matched the story. It looked like the streets it was filmed on, not like a studio backlot. Variety noticed something else worth mentioning too, pointing out that despite the obvious budget limitations, the action sequences were constructed with surprising intricacy and flair, using John Woo-style slow motion and layered, multi-angle coverage that most low-budget films can't afford to attempt. Abbott stretched every single dollar of that budget, and the rough aesthetic ended up becoming part of the film's identity rather than a limitation to hide. Hood cinema didn't need Hollywood sheen to feel authentic. It needed exactly what Super 16mm delivered, texture that money alone can't buy. Number 12. Critics gave it 0%. But the soundtrack still hit number 1. Critics didn't just dislike this movie, they completely buried it. State Property landed a flat 0% on Rotten Tomatoes across 12 reviews, without a single positive one in the bunch. Metacritic scored it a brutal 9 out of 100. The New York Times called it a remarkably tedious film, while Variety said it was sunk by a hackneyed script and atrocious acting. The audience simply didn't care what critics thought. The soundtrack dropped on January 29, 2002, just 11 days after the film's theatrical release, and it debuted at number 14 on the Billboard 200 and number 1 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart. By August 2003, it had moved 147,000 copies. Production from Just Blaze and Kanye West, plus Beanie Sigel and Freeway trading verses back and forth, gave the music real weight that the movie itself couldn't match on screen. Critics score films, fans buy albums. Those are two completely different scoreboards, and State Property proved you can lose one badly while still winning the other. Number 13. Jacob the Jeweler had a cameo playing a fence named Eli. Watch the credits closely and one name jumps out immediately. Jacob Arabo, better known across the industry as Jacob the Jeweler, makes a cameo appearance in State Property playing a fence named Eli, a character who moves stolen product that fell off trucks and out of safes. This wasn't just a random casting choice. Jacob was the man who put diamonds on nearly every major rapper working in New York during that era. The notorious B.I.G. wore his pieces. Jay-Z wore his pieces. Basically, the entire Roc-A-Fella roster wore his pieces at one point or another. If you had a hit record in the late 90s or early 2000s, there's a good chance you had a Jacob chain sitting in a safe somewhere. His small role in this film carries a much bigger cultural presence once you understand exactly who he was in the hip-hop world at that time. It's a blink and you miss it cameo that quietly connects the movie to the entire jewelry and fashion economy surrounding early 2000s hip-hop. Quick reminder to subscribe if you are enjoying these revelations. And tell me in the comments, do you know any strange fact about this movie that I didn't mention? Let's build the list together. Number 14. This movie accidentally launched an entire film studio. State Property wasn't just a movie release, it was a studio's opening statement. Roc-A-Fella had already conquered the music industry, and now they wanted film too. State Property became their very first feature, officially launching Roc-A-Fella Films as a real production company in January 2002, opening in theaters across 61 cities as a clear statement of intent. They weren't done after that. Later that same year, Roc-A-Fella released Paid in Full, the Harlem drug trade epic starring Wood Harris, Mekhi Phifer, and Cameron. Critics hated State Property, but genuinely respected Paid in Full, which meant the same label produced two very different legacies within 12 months. The momentum kept rolling from there. 2003 brought Paper Soldiers, a comedy featuring Kevin Hart years before he became a household name. Then came Death of a Dynasty, a hip-hop industry satire with cameos from Jay-Z, Mariah Carey, and Aaliyah in one of her final screen appearances. State Property 2 followed in 2005, this time directed by Damon Dash himself, without Abbott returning to the chair. 4 films in 4 years turned a record label into a movie studio, and it all traces back to this one low-budget starting, almost at the end, and the best is still coming. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next, and drop your city or country in the comments. I want to see how far this video is reaching. Number 15. It opened in just 61 theaters, then became a home video hit. This movie never got a wide release. It got a targeted one instead. State Property opened on January 18, 2002, in just 61 theaters concentrated in Philadelphia, New York, Atlanta, and Chicago. Urban markets where the Roc-A-Fella brand already had built-in traction. The theatrical run eventually peaked at 75 screens total, with a box office haul of about $2.1 million, Respectable for such a small footprint, but far from the real payday. The real money came later, once DVD and VHS sales kicked in. The film climbed to become the 10th top-selling video in the entire United States according to VideoScan and Billboard tracking, and BET put it into heavy regular rotation on television. Audiences found this movie on their own terms, in living rooms instead of multiplexes, which is exactly how a lot of hood cinema built its lasting audience during that era. The film also spawned its own clothing line, State Property Apparel, operating as a subsidiary of Roc-A-Wear, meaning the same name on the movie poster ended up printed on hoodies too. Roc-A-Fella understood synergy and cross-promotion long before that became a standard corporate buzzword in entertainment marketing. Bonus: the entire film empire just sold for $100. Here's the fact almost nobody in hip-hop wants to talk about, and it's the one we teased at the very start. On December 30th, 2025, Damon Dash's film company, Poppington LLC, sold at public auction. The winning bid was just $100, 50 O's. The buyer was Mike Montano, CEO of Muddy Water Motion Pictures, the same company that had been suing Dash for years over unrelated business disputes. The sale included the rights to State Property 2, Honor Up, Mr. Untouchable, and several other films in Dash's catalog. Decades of work changed hands for the price of a decent dinner. The collapse reportedly started with a dispute over the 2019 film Dear Frank, where Dash was hit with an $805,000 judgment for copyright infringement. Then he allegedly made comments about the plaintiff on the Earn Your Leisure podcast and ended up with a $4 million defamation judgment on top of that. His stake in Roc-A-Fella Records had already been auctioned off in November 2024 to cover $8.7 million in unpaid back taxes, which means New York State technically owns a piece of that legacy now. Montano reportedly called the $100 purchase a deliberate jab at Dash. An attorney representing other creditors noted that no outside bidders even bothered showing up to compete for the catalog. The film that launched an entire studio, made 18 times its budget, and hit #1 on the R&B charts, sold for less than a pair of sneakers. That's the ending almost nobody saw coming, and it's exactly why we saved it for last. And those were 15 strange facts about state property, plus one bonus that closes out the whole story. This movie never needed Hollywood's approval or a single positive review to matter. It needed the streets, and the streets showed up every single time. If you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, and comment which fact surprised you the most. And don't forget to suggest another movie that deserves a list of strange facts. See you in the next video.